Roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman,
Present.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Present.
Chairman Rivka.
Present. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please read agenda item number 3 into the record.
Approval of the motion summary for the meeting held September 5th, 2018, as recorded and transcribed.
Okay, having read the motion summary in advance, does any commission member wish to initiate further discussion? If not, do I hear a motion to accept and approve the subject motion summary as recorded and transcribed?
I will move to approve the subject motion summary as recorded and transcribed.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All righty, so we have such a move by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Hickman. Any final discussion? 1, 2, 3. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Rivka.
Aye, the motion carries. Okay, please read agenda item number 2 into the record.
Agenda item 4, update of the
Oh, I'm
fire.
sorry, 4.
That's fine. Update of the firefighter EMT paramedics list.
Okay, I yield the floor to Chief Donahue.
And Mr. Chairman, before Chief Donahue goes, I thought it might be helpful to give you some general comments and maybe some improvements on how we can give you this information going forward. We usually give you a notation. It's they're no longer on the list pursuant to, I don't know, I think it's Rule H, whatever. I think it would be helpful in the future. We're going to give you just a little bit more information by giving you the sub number as to the rule under that subsection H, so you kind of get a better idea as to why someone's being removed from the list. Most of those are pretty rote. There, I think, are 1 or 2 that have a little bit of, could have some sensitive information. So we're not going to get into detail, but at least you'll have an idea of which universe it is.
I agree.
And if it gets to the point where you're still not comfortable with the presentation that DAS or the chief gives, we could go into executive session to share those sensitive details. But I think at least giving you the subsection will give you a lot more detail as to why someone's being removed. Is that fair,
Oh,
Jeff?
that's very fair. That kind of makes it easier to approve the list and move on. That's great. Chief?
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon. Today, I'm bringing forward to you the addition of 4 full-time names for the full-time list and also 2 part-time. Along with that, bring you up to date. We are in the process of hiring 3 full-time. I know the note says 2 full-time, 2 part-time. One of those, we've actually done a conditional offer for full-time position, so it'll be 3 full-time personnel and 1 part-time person. Along with that, you'll notice Derek Choops has withdrew his employment and actually asked to be removed from the list. He does have another job. And also the removal of 1 additional is Darren mentioned, this is dealing with Civil Service Rule 5H. And this individual, through my interview, would not be eligible for hire.
Okay. Very good. So just as a bit of background, both of the lists, both the full-time and the part-time, were exhausted in March, I believe. And we have Fire Station 304 coming along. I think it's still going to be ready in January.
I'm hoping to have it staffed January 1st.
They seem to be finishing up the roof today, and they're inside the building working on electrical, so that's great. And you know, you always have to have some insurance in case any attrition materializes. So in June, you replenished the list, and you added 6 names to the full-time and 5 to the part-time. And then, as you just mentioned, from the June list, we hired 3 full-time, 1 part-time, 1 withdrew, and we took 1 off the list. And with the October list that'll come out, you'll have 4 names added to the full-time list and 2 part-times.
Correct.
That's super. Okay. A question on delegation of authority. So the regulations say that the appointing authority is the city manager in most cases, unless otherwise notified. Do you have delegation of authority to make all those decisions?
I'll refer to the city or to our city attorney for that.
So the city manager is the ultimate appointing authority who makes all decisions regarding who is ultimately hired. The final step is they meet with Tom and then he writes the letter. So he retains that authority. There is a delegation in terms of preparing of the lists. My understanding is DAS and the chief send a memo to the city manager saying this is what we're going to do with the list to get his feedback from that point, because he's not going to sit there and parse all the lists based on the number. So he gets a recommendation memo And that part is delegated down here, and the commission gets that, but Tom retains the ultimate hiring authority.
So you do the recommendation, we approve it, and then it goes to Tom for the final approval. Got it. That makes sense to me. Okay. Okay, I think that's it on the list. Does any commission member have any further questions or comments on the list proposed? If not, do I hear a motion to accept and approve the subject firefighter, EMT, paramedics list as presented?
I so move.
Okay, Mr. Hickman. Do I hear a second? All right, we have a move by Mr. Hickman, second by Mr. Koss. Any final discussions? 1, 2, 3, none? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Koss.
Aye.
Chairman Rivka.
Aye. Motion carries. Does any public want to say? Okay, great. Welcome. You're always welcome here. Okay. Just some things under committee comments. Chief, we had a kind of severe fire down at Glen Ross. I'm going to pass the picture around. You can see. I mean, it's a $500,000 home down there. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened and how it started?
Certainly. Cause has not been determined. Let me explain a little bit about cause and origin and our role and responsibility dealing with this because it is a very litigious society. No offense to our our lawyers in the room.
Two of us here.
But what we end up looking at basically is accidental versus a non-accidental versus a criminal activity and locate the origin of the fire. In doing so, we tried to do our best to identify the exact cause. However, with the requirements dealing with fire investigation at this point in time, and specifically NFPA standards for that, makes it very difficult for fire departments to do that because every insurance company is looking for subrogation pertaining to that. Often, as a result of that, we have to be very careful of contaminating any type of equipment. We really do not get into pulling light sockets out anymore or opening up furnaces other than to ensure that the fire is extinguished. And the reason for that, insurance companies will end up sealing the building off at that point in time and then bringing all potential parties involved in opening it back up and sending equipment out for testing. So what we really do is really do a preliminary, try to identify if it's a criminal intent, if it's accidental or non-accidental, and leave it at that point. And then we work with the insurance companies because they have a lot more financial resources and capabilities with that. So a lot of times our fires will go early on as an undetermined because it'll take in essence up to a year to really come out with the final determination of what that cause is. I will also often refer to it as a puzzle. And you may have seen my statement concerning the Liberty Castings fire, that everybody's looking at the cause, the night of or the day after. And at that point in time, I said, all we have as far as a puzzle are the corners. And until that final piece of the picture, or that final piece gets put in there, do you have a true picture of what exactly happened? And that's what I hold with this. Sometimes there's not a doubt in your mind of what happened, but we don't have that here in this case whatsoever. So we're still continuing to investigate. We'll be working with the insurance company as they continue their investigation at this point in time.
That Glen Ross area, has there been other fires down there?
No, this is actually, well, I say that, and I'm going to use the Station 304 area, so you can also include Broadmiller Estates or Broadmiller Reserve and Cheshire Crossing. I can remember 2 fires that we've had other than the one we had the other day. The other 2, one was right after I got here. This was a basement fire. It's actually a dehumidifier that caught fire. People came home to find their house black inside. The dehumidifier had caught fire. Excuse me, there was a water line right above it. And it was a plastic one, melted the plastic lines and extinguished the fire. But dehumidifiers with the plastic, and it circulated through. It turned everything inside black, and the smoke had already dissipated. That was one. The other one was maybe 6 months ago in Broadmiller, and this was a cooking fire. I take that back. We actually did have another one in Cheshire a couple weeks ago, but this was a trash can inside of a garage where they're doing some varnishing. So the other fires were very small dollar-wise in comparison to this. This is actually called in by somebody out on the golf course, called it in, and certainly had a head start, quite a head start in the attic area, prior to our arrival. We had 3 other calls going on at the same time, and 2 medic calls and 1 other fire run. Their personnel were on there, got canceled. The ladder truck was the first one there, was headed to the other scene and was got the cancellation and headed down to that call. But I know there was some question as far as our response time. Certainly, when you look at that area, and I call it Little Italy because it's, you look at the city down south and sort of that boot, if you will. And our response times are about 10 minutes down to that area. We have reciprocal agreements with Berlin Township, Orange, Liberty Township that all responded with us as part of the first alarm assignment. Aletta was the first one there. Berlin Township, which is at Old State, and Cheshire was right behind us. The county medic that covers that area for us was actually the first one there. But that's all they can do. They don't have any firefighter gear, have any capabilities. But we had the bulk of the fire knocked down from our time of arrival within a half hour, and the fire declared out within 50 minutes. Most of the fire was located up in the attic area. We have some very early on pictures that on our arrival was actually blowing out the roof at that point in time. And it's very unfortunate. As I told the residents, as much as their hearts are aching because of their loss, our hearts are aching with them because of the damage and the impact that it has on that family. But also we take great pride in the work that our firefighters do. And when we have these type of incidences, it impacts us. And because really ultimately a firefighter's job is to prevent a fire. And I think we all recognize no matter what we do, there's going to be fires out there, but there was a system failure when we do have this. And interesting, we ended up having 2 of these fires that day. We had the one down south, and then we had one in East Central that did about $20,000 worth of damage.
Can you tell me again your metric for your fire?
Sure.
You said 10 minutes?
Well, our metric getting down to there right now is about 10 minutes or so. Our metric of what we're trying to accomplish is to be on scene within 6 minutes from the time 911 picks up the phone 90% of the time. What that means is you often hear people talk about response times with average. Average means that 50% of the time you meet it, 50% of the time you don't meet it. We're looking at a very high standard with our response times. We're trying to accomplish 90% of the time being there within 6 minutes. And quite frankly, with the stations as we have it laid out right now, we're accomplishing that about 71% of the time, which is still a very, very high standard that we're accomplishing with that. In this area, we're nowhere near meeting this time, and certainly Station 304, when it gets open, will have a significant impact on this. And when we did our 2010 fire levy analysis, it was only going to increase our response time overall by 1 to 2%. I think we're going to be up to about 5% just because of the growth. So I'm hoping about a 75% response time within that 6 minutes. Now the question bears, why 6 minutes? And our 6 minutes time frame includes a 1 minute dispatcher getting the information and dispatching it. Our guys 1 minute to get, as the call's going out, to get out to the trucks, get dressed, start heading out, and a 4 minute travel time. And that's a national standard of what we're trying to accomplish. But the reason then comes in, why 6 minutes? What are we trying to accomplish? Well, with that 6 minute time frame to get that first unit on scene, if it's a medical emergency and the most detrimental emergency is a cardiac arrest, somebody's heart stops, it's not perfusing the body and the brain. After 6 minutes of time, there's a 50% likelihood that we'll be able to resuscitate that patient without any type of brain damage. And every minute past that adds another 10%. So that's what we're trying to get there. If the body can be resuscitated, the likelihood, and we've had very great success with our resuscitation and having very limited brain damage, is because of our fast response time from a medical standpoint. From a fire standpoint, and as we saw in this house, and when you look around the room that we have here today, the amount of polycarbons that are located in here, and that's plastics that are all petroleum developed. So when you look at the wood here, is this really wood? No, it's got a wood laminate that's laminated with a glue. The laminate is made up of hydrocarbons, which is petroleum or oils, which what we have found since the development of those is that it creates a rapid growth and higher BTUs with the fire, which ultimately leads in a faster destruction of the house and rapid fire development in those structures. So what used to be a 20-minute time frame or better for a small little fire to grow in a couch till ultimately getting what we call flashover, which is full room involvement, is now happening within 3 to 5 minutes, and then having structural failure of those, because if you look at the newer houses, what are they made of? They're not true dimensional lumber. They're using 2x4s. They're pre-engineered with gusset plates, where the gusset plates are basically embedded in the 2x4s by 1/4 inch. And if you've ever seen them put up, when they're putting them up, they're shaking all over or twisting and so forth. So they're really not that secure. But these are pre-engineered systems that are seeing rapid development. And within 6 minutes, as I mentioned, we have very early on, the fire was through the roof. We were already having structural collapse in the rear of this structure, which what we ended up doing at that point in time, pulled the guys out that were inside fighting fire, and began outside, and then more of a structured interior fire attack because we knew it was in the attic. I did not want to use the ladder truck in that circumstance because all that would have done is push the fire down and spread horizontally. The key was to get underneath that fire, get it opened up, and get it extinguished, which we were able to do, but it had to be very structured in doing so. So that's why we have the 6-minute response time. Now that's for the first units to get there. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is get a what we call our effective response force. In other words, get the amount of equipment there so we can sustain an operation, okay? So when you look at your first-in engine, your first-in engine is going to be your fire attack. Your second-in engine is going to establish your water supply and then move to backup. Your third-in engine is what we call rapid intervention. And what they're there for is the safety of our personnel, that if there should be a structural collapse, because that's typically when it happens in the first few minutes, we want personnel there to be able to rescue our personnel. As far as the ladder truck, the first-in ladder truck is there for search and rescue of occupants, ventilation, and utilities. And then the medic there is established there for initially for the fire personnel as well as any type of occupants. And then a medic is added if it's a working fire for rehab of the personnel. So we're trying to get those personnel on scene within 10 minutes. There are some standards out there saying 12, but in the suburban, urban areas, we're trying to get those personnel on scene within 10 minutes from the time of call. We've been very successful here in the city. That we were running up until this fire at 85%. It's dropped us down to 75% of the time having that on a working fire. So we're very fortunate to be able to have the resources that we have here in our city.
Yeah, so you saw me on the scene down there, and trust me, I was not stalking the call at all. I was at work, and my wife called up and said, we got a fire across the street, because I live just down the road over there. And I said, well, go take care of the firefighters. I'll bring the ice. I was the ice guy. So we were nice enough to, talk to some of the neighbors to get some pizzas down to feed the crew and stuff like that. But by the time I got down there, you had quite a few trucks down there. I mean, I don't know how long it took to get there, but it was just fantastic the way the turnout came down.
Well, and it was interesting because ladder was in front of me along with 3 other police cars heading down to the scene along with myself. And as we turned on Cheshire, I saw Orange Township turning on Glen Parkway, coming in from that. And Berlin Township was coming in from the other. But that's exactly what you see. We do not wait for somebody to get on scene to tell us, hey, you got a fire before calling help. We're trying to get everybody there to begin our operation because we have 500 gallons. And depending on our truck, that ladder truck actually had 300 gallons of water on it. And our hose lines are flowing 185 gallons per minute. So if you don't have a hydrant connected, you're going to run out of water in a matter of two minutes. And as you saw, we had 2 hydrants hit on that one. We had 5 lines that we were utilizing on that fire. But even with a fire doing interior fire attack, those guys are in there for 20 minutes. You know, the fire doesn't stop when those guys come out to get their bottles changed. You have to have another crew ready to go, and then communicate on where they're at, what they're doing, and continue that operation. That's why we ensure we have the personnel on scene right from the get-go. And then if we identify that it is a actual fire, we'll call additional resources, what we call working fire, which adds an additional engine and ladder truck, medic unit, air unit, and so forth.
So had 3 or 4 been operational, they would have been there just like that.
They would have been there rapidly.
Yeah, the economic loss per minute is just
it would have. You would have had 3 guys there, and it probably been another 7 to 8 minutes before the rest of the crew would have showed up. Damage-wise, it's probably would have still been the same. And the reason being is this was a difficult initial fire because it was in the attic area. And so
I don't even know if our attics are really accessible. That house was Parade Homes years ago.
Correct.
I don't know who the builder was, but it's unfortunate that the neighbor of that house had just moved in 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I said, don't worry. We're going to go fire and police. And I said,
and being a neighbor there, and I know Dean Paul was the one that also had his driveway set up, and you're absolutely right. It was absolutely phenomenal, the support and outpour of care, not only to the resident there, but also to the firefighters. It was greatly appreciated, and we're going to get a thank you note out to everybody. Please do.
The 304 is literally like a mile away from where that.
Yes. Yes. Everybody passed it other than Berlin Township to get to this fire.
Thank you. Well, I have a commitment from Berlin Township before 304 because I said, who's going to come to my house first? Is it you guys or is it going to be, Delaware City? He said, don't worry about it. We'll get there. I said, okay. All right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Very helpful. This week's First Friday features fire trucks and furry friends. So Chief McCrew will be out there for show and tell, I believe. And just as a general comment in an unrelated area, I just want to offer my sincere and personal thanks to everybody who worked on the city's Delaware Together the comprehensive plan. So I saw many of you at this table over there, and it's very, very much appreciated. We have, I think Dave said, over 800 comments that came in, and I think last week we opened up an online version to everybody that we can get in touch. So if we can make it go viral, that'll bring us over $1,000 or over 1,000 comments, I think. So thank you very, very much on that one. Does any commission member have any further pursuits, any questions or comments that they want to entertain right now?
Yeah. First of all, Chief, that was a great explanation of how you and your team operate. And when I went through some of the training early on when I came back to town, I remember having some of those discussions with you. Well put. So I don't know if anyone knows this or not, but there's a president that came from this town. And I just want to suggest President Rutherford B. Hayes. The reason I say that, kind of tongue in cheek, is that people come to this town that are kind of following the presidents, where they were born, where they grew up, where they live, and they come here and they can't find Rutherford B. Hayes. And so there is a committee that's working on a memorial for that, and I've been fortunate to be that member of that committee. And I know Fire Chief was spreading rumors that the reason I was on this committee is because I voted for Rutherford B. Hayes, but that is
He voted for his opponent.
Yeah, I voted for the opposition. So, anyhow, it's what we're trying to say here is that what do you call it, a catchword or whatever, but the phrase is bringing Rutherford B. Hayes home. In the last 90 days, here's what's taken place. And this committee's been around for about 2.5 years, folks. In the last 90 days, here's what's happened. We've secured a primary and a secondary location. Your primary is right there on the corner, right there next to Amounts. We have entertained and vetted 4 different sculptors. We've selected a sculptor, and we've just begun. And as a matter of fact, First Friday, which you mentioned, will be our first announcement. And there'll be about 3 or 4 announcements about every half hour of what's going to be happening with regard to that. And we've started our funding. Actually, the sculptor will be there, and they're going to have a bust and what they call a maquette. I've learned some new language here. A maquette is about a 2-foot rendition of what this is going to look like. It will be a statue, and it will be right there on the corner. So a lot of good things going on. We all know he was born here. What you may not know is that a few months before he was born, his father passed away, and shortly after, as a young boy, his brother died. He went to school here, met his wife actually at the school that's now known as Ohio Wesleyan, met her there on the grounds. Went to school over at Gambier at Kenyon, and oftentimes he walked there. That's how he got to school. Went to Harvard Law because he had a rich uncle. Was named then, he went to Cincinnati, and he was named as the #1 attorney in the city of Cincinnati, became the solicitor for the city. When the war came along, he raised his right hand and was actually commissioned as a major. Rose to the rank of a 2-star general during the Civil War. Pretty unusual for a non-West Point grad in those days, if you know the history. Was wounded 4 times, had 5 horses shot out from under him. And later on served as a congressman, actually a governor, 3 terms, and actually helped found Ohio State University, among other things. So it's time to bring him home. And he's real home, and everything about him today is up at Fremont. And we've actually gotten some cooperation from those folks. So we're pretty excited about this. It's about time he has a presence back here where he grew up. So, and if you're interested in donating, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you after the meeting. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for the kind words about ours. And, Joe's here as union vice president, but I know you've heard me say before, I've got the easy job. I get to come to meetings like this, but they're the guys that are out, boots on the street and actually doing the job for us. So it's really a positive comment towards our firefighters. So
Well, some of the neighbors already talked about adopting the folks in 304. So
as I told our guys,
at least the first year, right?
when they moved out to Station 303, it was going to be a completely different experience for them. Because Station 301's on Ohio Wesleyan's campus, and it's a busy area right there, but Station 302 is almost remote. But 303, the amount of people that just stop in there, and Station 304 is going to be even different from that. And so thank you. And it's not our firehouse, it's our firehouse.
Now, I will admit, I did call the Delaware Gazette and said, "Where are you?" They were tied up, and I just refer them to you to
I appreciate
get something out there, because it's a good public story for the city.
And Glenn did reach out to me. We got pictures out to him.
That's fantastic. Okay, there being no further business to conduct, I move to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have such a move by Mr. Ripka, second by Mr. Cox. Any final discussion? 1, 2, 3. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hickman?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Koss,
Yes.
Chairman Rivka?
Aye. Roll call, that is done. So this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.